Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit. Let's have a gander, shall we? This is Pyre from Supergiant Games. This was footage captured at PAX East 2016, so it is certainly footage that is in development. This is from a 28, 29 or so minute demo. I was able to capture the whole thing from start to finish, which is awesome. And each of these playthroughs is probably going to be a little bit different. So if you stumble across somebody else's, then you may notice a few different paths here and there, since the game is, at least once it's been completed, designed for replayability. Now, I'm going to include a link to a full unedited and commentary-free video, which is going to be the whole thing. It's about 28 minutes of footage, uncut. And the reason for that is simply because Supergiant create these games which are unbelievably beautiful and also sound phenomenally good, with great voice talent and usually exceptional music from Darren Korb. I would not want to deprive you of that. And if you might remember correctly, the last time we covered a Supergiant game was, in fact, Transistor at PAX East 2013, possibly 12, good lord, I don't know when. But I did the same thing there too, and people seem to appreciate it, so I'm going to do it here as well. There are going to be some cuts in this particular piece of footage, simply because there are times which take a little longer, and I'll probably cut out the tutorial as well. But outside of that, it's my pleasure to present to you probably one of the most beautiful looking games I have ever seen. So this is Pyre, and it's the third game from Supergiant that brought you Bastion and Transistor. This is very, very different to the titles that they have presented to us previously. You may notice immediately that there's more than one character, or two indeed. It's in fact a party of three here, and you're going to be saddled with these fellows. You are not any of those people. You are in fact an exile that has been found near death in the desert by these fellows in their very strange-looking wagon that you can see in the background there. They debate whether or not to kill you. They decide, hey, you know what? Nah, you can stick around. You might be useful, and you will indeed be traveling with them on their strange and exotic journey. And I do use the word exotic correctly, I think, because the art style of this game and the aesthetic, outside of being mind-blowingly gorgeous, is clearly heavily influenced by, say, Gypsy, Romani, and indeed Arabian culture, I think. And it's very different. It's very colorful, and I would say that it's also influenced by the idea of a nomadic race of people. Very unusual, not the sort of thing that we see in games all that often, and continuing the tradition of Supergiant Games producing things which look very different and out of the ordinary. In fact, I'd say that this is the most radical departure art style-wise from anything normal that I've seen from them, and that's impressive considering that Transistor was also a very unusual-looking game, although you could obviously tell the cyberpunk influence there. So these dialogue-heavy portions of the game are where you're going to be getting the majority of your exposition, which is, again, what I can see as something of a departure from previous titles from Supergiant. Hello, that is some dog/rat thing with a mustache. Of course it is. Why not? During Bastion and Transistor, you'll notice that the majority of the narration and the exposition comes from this bodiless narrator. In Bastion, it is actually a character in the game. And in Transistor, it is, of course, the sword that you're carrying around, the transistor that provides that element of narration for you. From what I can see here, there is a narrator. He does sound very different, although I do know that Logan Cunningham is involved in this project again. But from my impression of the demo footage, the narration seems to be a little bit more sparse than the previous titles. It does happens in the battle sequences for the most part. And I'd say there is voice acting with the characters, but there really isn't. It's using some sort of, I assume, made-up foreign language. And there does not, at least not yet anyway, appear to be full voice acting for the game. But these sequences right here are going to expand upon the lore of the title. You've noticed that I'm able to move the cursor across various highlighted words, which will allow me to gain an insight into what those words mean in the context of this universe, and then just prepare to have your mind blown by how unbelievably beautiful that is. Look at that thing. In terms of art style and art direction, this might be the most beautiful game that I have ever seen, and that is saying a lot, because I've seen a lot of very, very good-looking games indeed. Anyway, back to the point about the exposition. These sequences will give you the insight into the characters, and getting to know these traveling companions is indeed, from what I can see, part of the joy of the experience. It's a less solitary experience than Transistor and Bastion. Transistor gave you a traveling companion, albeit a somewhat inanimate one, and Bastion, the only characters that you would really meet were actually inside the hub area. Here, however, you're given a team of 3 characters to do battle, and this is the battle sequence, the battlefield, as it were. And this is another part of the game. There are essentially 3 different components to this game. The voice acting and the expositionary sections right there, the dialogue, these battlefields, these rituals, and a traveling sequence in which you're able to travel to different places in the world, and you're able to make choices and gather resources and train characters and interact with the various denizens of this rather strange and wonderful desert that you're traveling through here. Now, this is the tutorial sequence right here. I probably won't show you all of this simply because I can explain it a little bit quicker. But what you'll notice is it's trying to train you in what is one of the most unusual battle systems that I've ever seen in what could be considered an RPG. Is it an RPG? You know, weirdly enough, this game actually feels more like a sports game than anything else. So, let me try and explain what the hell is going on, because you're probably just completely confused at this point, as I was as well, by the way. Why did I just run into a green flame with a giant blue ball? That is a great question. Thank you for asking it. So what you are provided with on the battlefield is a team of 3 characters that all have different attributes. And you have what's basically a goal. The green flame right there is a goal, and that power orb is the ball. You use one of your characters, you can control one at any given time, you can switch between them dynamically, to grab the ball, as the enemy character just did there, and you're trying to get it into the opponent's goal. No, I'm deadly serious. You might be thinking, what on earth are you talking about? That sounds like a sports game. It does, doesn't it? And that's sort of what I realized halfway through the playthrough, is that the battle system seems very much inspired by a sport. And it makes sense, actually, because what you're engaging in is a form of ritual combat for honor, more so than anything else. So it makes actually quite a lot of sense that it feels like a sport. So while you do not have the ball, you're able to cast a magical spell which will banish one of the opponent's characters for a few seconds. It will, of course, force them to drop the ball. And you are also able to project an aura. If a character runs into that aura and doesn't have an aura of their own, usually that means they have the orb, that turns the aura off, then they will be banished, again, for a few seconds. So right now, my sort of medium-sized character here has the orb, it loses the aura, and I want to try and get it into the goal. I want to leap into it. In fact, it's actually possible to leap over the opponent's auras here, and when you get it right anyway, actually jump into the pyre, which I'm screwing up multiple times, but there we go, and into the pyre we go. And that's actually going to weaken the pyre somewhat, it's going to diminish it, and eventually the pyre will go out. And the goal of the game, at least in the battle sequences, is to make sure that the enemy pyre goes out before yours does. Every time there's a play made, and every time that the pyre is reduced, the field is reset, you have one of your characters banished. Whoever sacrificed himself in the pyre is banished. So you end up in a 3-on-2 situation if you happen to be in the lead. And then you'll attempt to get the ball. You can pass the ball. You can dash with the ball. And there are other abilities that you'll be able to unlock later on. You might be thinking to yourself, what is this? Is this a game by Supergiant? Is this an action RPG? I'll tell you what it is. It's Pyre. There's no other way to describe it. It is in a class of its own in terms of the sheer, I suppose, bizarre design on display here. This is easily, I think, the most creative thing that Supergiant has ever made in terms of mechanics that come completely out of left field. It reminds me more of Blitzball than it does of Bastion. And you know what? That's actually a good thing, because there's nothing else quite like it. You'll notice the plays that I was making there. I was able to zone out an opponent using my larger character and using that aura, standing in the way, essentially creating a defensive barrier. I was able to sneak around the opponent there and time my attacks correctly. It's an astonishing little system that takes quite a lot of getting used to, but once you get it, once you've nailed it down, it becomes incredibly tense, and it can get down to the wire as well, because you can absolutely lose these fights. Now, I'm going to skip forward out of the tutorial area, because I want to show you some of the traveling and kind of the roguelite aspects, I suppose, of said traveling and the choices that you're going to make, and then I'll show you the final battle, which is a full-on bit of combat, which is actually quite tricky. This is tutorial there. The guys are barely moving. It's quite easy to avoid them, but in the final battle, you're facing off against a full other team, and they are quite tough to deal with indeed, and you are fighting for honor. You are fighting, essentially, for your right to be recognized once again. And the story, needless to say, has not been 100% fleshed out in the demonstration period. There's a lot to learn, but that's going to be the joy of the game, of course. And he snuck one in. Nasty. All right, I'm going to skip forward here, and I'm going to show you the traveling and some of the choices that you can make in the process. Now, I've got to show you this whimsical little animation. Look at that. Just a little hop, skip, and a jump there on that cart. What's interesting is that this game seems to have quite a lot more comedy than the previous titles. Transistor was a very solemn game. It was a very sad game in many ways. And Bastion, while colorful, was post-apocalyptic. You know, it was pretty grim if you looked at it. This has a feeling of playfulness, a feeling of whimsy and fantastical element to it. And that's sort of defined quite nicely by how strange this cart that you're traveling in is. It's powered by these little gremlins. It looks like it's falling to pieces. It's brightly colored. It's a traveling cart. It's a gypsy cart, a Romany cart. You have a strange and colorful cast of characters, this aggressive sort of bull goat thing, that mustached rat or dog, and then the guy who just seems to be happy to be here. Do you trust Roki? I don't know. He will ask you a little bit later as to whether or not his particular mustache is considered trustworthy. And as you travel around the level here, you're able to choose a bunch of different activities, and it's going to take a couple of days to travel to where we're going. So I'm able to study, which will allow me to decipher part of probably the most beautiful looking book I've ever seen. Look at the animation on that. It's so gorgeous. You can study a chapter of it, and this will unlock more lore, and it will also allow you to teach your companions eventually once you've gained this knowledge. And you can also speak to the companions and or go foraging for resources if you so desire, which will allow you to give resources to your blacksmith, which will let you craft different items. Very different to the previous titles from Supergiant, no doubt about it. This addition of a kind of Oregon Trail aspect to it is utterly unusual. We're inside the wagon right here. That is the drive imp. I can poke it and it will wiggle around a little bit. It's a beautiful little run-down ramshackle wagon that we have right here. You can check out a couple of different items, and you can read the book, and you can speak to a couple of different characters as well, which will obviously expand the story somewhat. And the further you go through this, the nicer this wagon will be in terms of its appointments. But the traveling aspect of it and those choices that you make is the third component that I was talking about. The first part being that exposition, the voice acting, the writing, the kind of cutscenes. The second part being the ritual 3 versus 3 kind of sports ball battle, I suppose. And the third part being the traveling. So we're able to actually choose a place to go, and it's going to tell me a little bit about those places, and hopefully I'll be able to access something. I'm going to go and see what's going on with Roki. Looks like he wants to go and meet a contact. I don't know if that's a good thing or not. But you'll notice that these elements are the key pillars, I suppose, of the replayability that this game is going to offer. Now, I felt that Bastion offered a good amount of replayability, as did Transistor, actually, if you played the New Game Plus mode. But some people did criticize it because it was so story-driven as being something that you wouldn't necessarily want to play twice. I mean, I fundamentally disagree with that opinion, but it's a valid opinion nonetheless, and some people do believe that. I think that they've probably taken that to heart when it came to the development of Pyre, and they're focusing a great deal here on this replayability, and a lot of that is going to come from the way that you travel through the world and the places that you go to. And you can also gain different traveling companions, and you'll be able to put them into the battle. You'll notice, again, in the battle sequences that the traveling companions have different sizes, they have different sort of inherent abilities that you can use, and I'll be able to train some of those up towards the end of this video. And the combination of those different characters is what is going to give you the plays, I guess. It's so strange to keep referring to this as a sports game, but in essence, if you dig right down to it, it's got a lot of obvious sports influence. And to me, that's an incredible risk and a great one, and that a studio would be known, of course, for the creation of these great action RPGs that are often very serious, and then along comes this whimsical, almost hokey little adventure in which the battle system is inspired by rugby, football, lacrosse. I don't know, all of these things. It's a desert magical ritual arcane lacrosse of some sort. There's nothing else like that. It's so unique and wonderful, and I'm so happy to have had a chance to play it. Like, if you haven't realized, I guess, by the tone of my voice, Pyre blew me away. It's all about the mustache. He's been getting conflicting reports about it. You know, there's already so much character to this guy. I'm very interested in, but I'm also very suspicious of his motivations. I don't trust him. I'm going to lie to him and say that I do, but this actually benefits him in some way. You can talk to your companions and you can become friends with them, or, of course, adversarial. You can encourage them, and that will give you bonuses in these upcoming ritual battles. So let's skip forward to the final ritual battle, which closes out the demo, and you'll notice that there's a bit of a conflict between our party and the enemies that we run into. You notice the constellation there, which indicates the beginning of the ritual, and just a quick hop, skip, and a jump forward, and you will be able to see exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to this final battle sequence. There we go, and into the final battle we go. You'll notice that this terrain actually has some obstacles that you've got to watch out for here and there. And that is our party of three. The little dog mustache thing, I think, is the little one. He's the fastest one. He can leap the furthest. The giant goat woman and the whatever the other dude is. And those are the two ritual pyres. The stars are aligned, the pyres burn bright, and we begin the rites. Of course, we must defeat the heretics, I suppose. And they apparently have some sort of history. We are the Nightwings, a group of exiles, apparently. And these fellows, I believe, are the accusers. That is Lendl of the accusers. I do not know what kind of relationship these guys had. I'm looking forward to investigating it. May I also say that might be the best fire effect in any game ever. Hyper stylized, but absolutely wonderful. And off we go. I'm going to control my sort of a medium fellow there. There's the tackle, I guess. And I'll quickly switch to our fast-moving character who's going to try and outflank them. And there's a quick jump and around the side. Now, you might notice that if you use the smaller character to jump into the pyre, then it only reduces the pyre strength by 1. If you use one of the heavier characters who are much slower and kind of easier to catch, then you will reduce the pyre even further. Now, I did knock them out of the way, which is not ideal, and I missed with the magic, so I'm going to end up losing 2 points on my pyre here as well. I love this system. It's so unusual, but what I will say is that compared to the previous games that Supergiant has made, it feels very separate, very divided from the rest of the game, whereas Bastion was fairly consistent. Outside of the hub area, you would travel, be delivered the story on the way by the narrator, and you would engage in real-time battles as and when they came. Transistor was a little bit more separated, in the sense that you would enter an area and it would usually become sort of a battle arena that you were locked into. This game has gone full-on separation between the story, the travel, and the battles. Whether or not you think that's a good thing is going to be certainly down to personal preference. There's really no doubt about that. It is something that could potentially annoy fans of the studio, but there's something I'd like to point out in particular, because this is a consistent problem when it comes to games discussion, particularly when you have a developer that's got several titles under their belt. It is unfair to typecast the developer based on the games that came before. The expectation that you should have of a game should not be based on the games they've made prior to that, especially if the genre is not the same. It's not unreasonable to suggest that parts of the same franchise should certainly share common elements. Absolutely. However, this is not part of a franchise. This is a new game in and of its own right, and frankly, I think a studio like this should be praised for risk-taking and for innovation in terms of mechanics, which I genuinely believe this game absolutely does, because I don't know anything else like this. You notice the maneuvering going on here. I'm trying to make best use of my characters. I almost scored there, I guess is the term to use it. With my larger character, she will respawn momentarily. I'll be able to use it. There's a quick dash and just missed the pyre, unfortunately, but I'm able to save the ball nonetheless. Now, I will say that these battles may take quite a long time, especially if you're not very good at them like me. I was still trying to figure out the whole system. It is in real time. There is not a pause function, which is something that Transistor certainly had. So that may cause a few difficulties for people. But I'm not going to say that I didn't like it, because I absolutely adore it, because it's completely new. It's something utterly different. And the tension is palpable. I mean, just the quick hop over the enemy, particularly right into the Pyre, evading their auras to make sure you're not destroyed, losing the ball, trying your best to aim a magical spell to eliminate one of the enemies for a while before they're able to do the same to you. It's tense, it's quick, it requires certainly precision, micromanagement, no doubt about that. I'm actually losing here. I'm down to 4 energy points out of 10. That's not good at all. And the narrator in the background will certainly complain about that, no doubt. So it may alienate some people that were used to the turn-based functionality of Transistor, but it's worth bearing in mind that Bastion, of course, was fully real-time. There's the dash around the side. Can we do it? We managed to dash in just at the last minute there. I'm going to be honest. I'm completely and utterly entranced, ensconced by this title and just how odd it is. And I mean that in the best possible way. I don't mean odd as a negative. I mean odd certainly as a positive. Because this game stands out from the pack as something utterly unique in and of itself. And we don't get that many games which can be considered truly unique, I think, in this day and age. It's not to say it hasn't inherited ideas and mechanics from other genres. It certainly has. But the battle system is that unusual. And so is the setting. The art design is on another level. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Obviously, it's highly subjective, but I love the use of color. The animation quality is absolutely superb. The amount of detail is wonderful, and of course, the cultural influences are highly welcome when it comes to creating an original and interesting world. It's a world I want to explore. It's a world I want to know more about. It's a world which I wish to absorb every single little piece of lore that possibly exists for it. And in between absorbing that lore, I get to get involved in these really interesting, unique, and engaging battles. Or sports rituals, I suppose. What a game. I mean, how else can I possibly describe it? It's the game that blew me away the most, certainly, on the first day of PAX, because I went in there with extremely high expectations, because it is a Supergiant game. Bastion was my top game of 2011. Transistor was easily in the top 4 or 5 of 2014. So I expected great things. I did not expect this. It's so different and so interesting. Supergiant has made 2 amazing games so far. This looks like it's going to be the 3rd, by the looks of it, based on what I played of this sort of 25 or so minute demo. It looks like there's so much more to see and discover, new mechanics to unlock, new skills to unlock, and of course a lot of depth and a great deal of replayability. I want to learn about these new characters, I want to recruit them to my party, I want to see how they fare in these ritual battles. I want to gain these masteries and skills that you see right here, and unlock either a longer stride or a better spell attack there for my character, so she's going to be a lot more useful now. I just don't know what to expect, which is great. I love going into games with a sense of mystery. I understand now what Pyre is. It's a difficult game to grasp just because of how unusual it is. But I see what they're trying to do. I get their vision, and I want to be part of that. I want to experience the rest of this, and I want to learn everything I can about this weird, wonderful, and whimsical world that they've created here. Greg Cassavan and his team look like they're on the verge of building an absolute masterpiece, a piece de resistance. Just absolutely beautiful, mind-blowing, enchanting, magical game. I am that damn impressed. And why wouldn't I be? Just look at it. Pyre, ladies and gentlemen. If you like this video, then by all means do feel free to click the like button. If you do not, the dislike button is right over there, you heretic. If you would like to watch the whole thing unedited, and with all of the narration and voice acting and music available, then there is a link in the description below this video. Thank you to Greg and his team for demonstrating this game to me. I very much appreciate it. I'm going to bed happy now. What can I say? This is why I love video games. This right here. I'll see you next time.